So as most of you must know, today's webinar's main topic of focus is maintaining students' interest through happiness. And I am the host and founder of Take It from the Future, which is an initiative which aims to provide student insights to educators about how they can make education more student-friendly, as in appealing and comfortable to students. So today it will be all about happiness, as you might have already assumed from the quote that I was sharing. And we'll begin with an introduction, talk about why we're talking about this topic in the webinar and how it is student-friendly, why it matters. Then we will be talking about a TED Talk that I gave a year ago. And then I'll be talking about the main content for today, which is the dose theory, which is a strategy that educators can use to maintain the students' interest in class through upkeeping their happiness. And then we will wrap up our webinar through a conclusion session. So let me talk about the introduction and why it matters. Why does happiness of students matter today? So here are some shocking statistics that I would like to share with all of you. 75% of US high school students expressed boredom, anger, sadness, fear, or stress while in school. And next, around 500 Japanese students below the age of 20 kill themselves each year. And every September 1st, that's when the school year starts, the teen suicide rate tends to occur 3 times higher compared to any other day. What this speaks to me is that education is becoming deadly. As you can see from the first statistic, education is becoming uninteresting. The second statistic tells us that the education system is killing 500 students in Japan, destroying 500 bright futures, and wasting 500 potentials. And this number adds up year after year after year. Today, we will talk about happiness, because happiness in your students as educators leaves no room for boredom, anger, sadness, or stress while in school. That is to say that 75% of US high school students, when happy, will be undisturbed by these distracting emotions. And that is also to say that they will have better attention in class, and 500 Japanese students will start to accept school and enjoy it. So today's topic has something for each party, students and educators. It appeals to students' happiness, and it teaches educators a way of maintaining their interest in class. In fact, I believe that happiness is a field we all need to work on, especially during online learning, during the pandemic, during the lockdown, which is a financial crisis, during a health crisis, and even work from home. So let me continue. Now I will introduce a TED Talk that I gave a year ago and how it links to today's webinar. So in December 2020, I gave a TED Talk called Your Looking Glass House. And its main theme was happiness, as you might guess. And I talked about 3 different strategies for that. So if you're interested in watching it, then I will post the link at the end of this webinar, and you can have a look at that. And here are the timestamps that you should look for if you want to know more about the dose theory. That is the happiness strategy that I will share with you today and how students can implement that in their classes. So this pretty much establishes that I came up with this idea and got inspired from it, not recently, but actually a year ago. And this has provided me the perfect opportunity to apply this to classroom settings and spread this information to you all. So now, before we get into the dose theory and our third section of the webinar, can I please get a hands up from every participant? It could be physical or it could be a reaction, just to see that you all are there. Awesome, thank you. So in this section, we will discover what this acronym stands for, how you can implement it in your classroom as an educator. And I would like to repeat that today's webinar topic has 2 different things for each participant. For students, it talks about how you can maintain your happiness. And for teachers, it talks about maintaining student interest in class and how your teaching can become more effective through this. So let's first discuss what this dose theory is. So originally it was called the EDSO chemicals, and each letter stands for happiness-causing chemical, hormone, or neurotransmitter. But here I will use these three terms interchangeably. And this was inspired by Simon Sinek's book, Leaders Eat Last. Now, if you want to get ahead and want to, have some informed guesses, then this is the chemical chart and the symbols it represents. So maybe you can predict something out of there. So now let me continue and introduce these four chemicals, like I said. The first one is dopamine, and it is the feeling of accomplishment which comes when you achieve a goal or make progress. So an example of dopamine was when I launched Ticket from the Future and I got short bursts of this chemical. So can anyone please raise their hand if you've ever heard about dopamine before this webinar? All right, I see that most of the participants didn't, so maybe it's a new learning opportunity for you. Now, we know that dopamine is a happiness-causing hormone, but how can we apply it in the classroom, especially for educators? So here is what my organization advises. First of all, create checklists for student activities. When you tick off a box from a checklist, you get these short bursts of dopamine because you can see that you're making progress. Next, it's very important, me, myself as a student, to give students reports that outline their progress. For this, I recommend using softwares that do that, such as CommonLit, so that students can see how far they have come. The problem with dopamine and using it in a classroom is that you cannot give it to students. Dopamine is, as you can see here, a selfish chemical. That is to say, you can only feel it yourself. Nobody can give you that happiness because of this chemical. Nobody can give you this chemical release. So you need to see your progress yourself to get bursts of dopamine. And another suggestion is to do goal settings per unit and chapter so that students can see if they're achieving, making progress. And this makes them feel interested and interacted in the classroom. And another way to take this a step further would be to do classroom reflections, because when we reflect, we get to see the progress we have made, we get to see how we've improved over time, and that just contributes to the burst of dopamine. All right, so now let's move on to number 2. Oxytocin. Now, this is the chemical of love and trust, and examples of it include when you hug your mother, play with your pets, or a colleague helps you with your work. And it basically refers to any place where you find connected, where you feel connected to someone. And unlike dopamine, it is a selfless chemical. That means you can give this chemical to someone. That is to say that if you express love, trust, or care towards someone, they would feel a release of oxytocin. And how do you apply this in your classroom? Well, first of all, start by bringing treats to the class. This way, it shows that you care about the nutrition of your students and also their enjoyment. I remember that my English teacher, Miss Iwana, once brought pancakes to our class, and that was the discussion of the day. Next, take part in personal discussions. When you take part in personal discussions, such as asking, how have you been doing? Is everything all right with your family? What did you eat last night? This makes a student feel special. I myself feel more interested in the class when my teacher asks me specific questions that make me feel special. Because when students feel special, they find a special connection with the teacher and their class in particular. And this deeply enhances their attention. Next, greet every student in a different way. This is another way of making every student feel special, cared, and valued in the class. And fourthly, be humorous. No one likes a strict and boring teacher who informs you the content. It's important that a teacher interacts with the student, and I have found one great way of doing it is to be humorous, like using puns, comedic anecdotes, or even satire. Moving on, number 3 is serotonin, and it is also a selfless chemical. That means you can give it to someone. And it is a happiness hormone released due to public recognition, praise, and pride. Examples of these include receiving positive feedback, applause, like performers, and then graduation parties or award ceremonies. These ceremonies were created for this particular reason because they give you a burst of serotonin. But how do you implement this in your classroom again? Well, you can start by implementing the applause culture, which is when students cheer for the other peers during classroom presentations. And there's a very beauty quote that I remember, which is praise in public, criticize in private. I myself can tell you that I have seen students who have been completely disinterested in class, but once the teacher starts to recognize their efforts in public, in the class, during online meetings, they start taking interest, and now those students are topping that subject. Next, give rewards for growth and progress. I remember that in grade 6, there was this optional task of writing a 700-word essay on carrots. And I tried doing that. It was the first time, really. But my teacher took a really different approach to it and gave me public recognition by giving me something special in return. And that motivated me to upkeep my interest in that subject forever. And this is another suggestion of an activity that I, as a student, would deeply appreciate, which is to organize a show and tell where students present their best work from the entire unit, entire chapter, or even entire semester in front of their peers and feel recognized. I think this is just what will give students the confidence of being talented and valued individuals in a class. And last but not the least, at least for sportive people, is endorphins. Now, this is a selfish chemical. That means you need to get it yourself. And it's primarily released when you exercise or even laugh. So examples of these include cross country at schools. And then there is this idea of runner's high. This is when athletes feel pleasure for some amount of time. It's because they've been running, they've been exerting themselves, and that's why they get the burst of the endorphins, apologies. And next, climbing Mount Everest. Some people might also deliver serotonin, which is public recognition. So how do you implement endorphins in your classroom? And I would say this is one of the easiest ways to do it. And I would highly recommend any educator out there to do this, because what it does, it helps students move out of their chairs in online learning, and it gives them a more healthy approach to life. So the first one is to play sit stand for the first 2 minutes of class. Now, this is a game that improves cognitive ability, it improves alertness, but most of all, it gets the students connected with the teacher. It gets the students uplifted. It gives them interest in the class. Next, it's very fun to have exercises as punishments for the losing team. For example, once in my English class, we did a bet about how many answers will there be to a question, and the losing team had to do push-ups. Next, I think it's very important not to hesitate to giggle. Laughter is always fun, and there is this very common quote, life is so much easier with a sense of humor. Well, I say education is much easier with a sense of humor as well. Next, it will be really healthy, but also important happiness-wise and interest-wise to do 3-minute short workouts like eyes exercises, jumping jacks, head tilts during class breaks, because not only will it give students a more healthy way to perform class online, but it will release happiness and it will maintain their interest in your class. So those were the 4 dose chemicals. But now let me answer this question about why I call them the dose chemicals and not the EDS zone. And I'm quite confused why it did not strike Simon Sinek. Well, this is because dose symbolizes that these 4 chemicals are a daily need, like you need a dose of them every day. So whenever you want to remember these, just think of taking a dose of them every day. And if you remember this and start to implement them in your daily life, inside, outside of class, then you'll learn that happiness can be taken for granted, because what usually happens is happiness comes and goes, but then we learn to make it stay. And that's very important in the education setting as well, especially today when students are coping with a lot of pressure, which includes added pressure due to the pandemic, and also very helpful for adolescents who are going through these new experiences. So that was the content delivery for the webinar now. And now we will move on to the conclusion, which will be something more engaging for all the participants. So let's begin with having a look at the previous exit ticket. For those who are new, exit ticket is a ritual at Ticket from the Future where we give you a kind of question, something to think about, food for thought, or a form to fill out at the end of every webinar so that you apply your knowledge. And now let's have a look at the previous exit ticket that I asked in webinar 1. And that was, do your students' emotions matter to you? And the perfect way I found to answer this question was with this quote. So it says, my students don't need me to learn, they need me to care. And I think that is the most vital difference between Google and teachers. Google cannot ask you for understanding. Google cannot form connections with you. Google cannot tell you that you're improving. And that's why I think it's extremely crucial that teachers start recognizing students' happiness and start uplifting them. Continuing. And now we will have a short Q&A session. So at the end of every webinar, we have 5 minutes of Q&A. If you have any questions at all, even any concerns, feedbacks, or comments about this webinar. So I will be starting the timer right now. And if you have anything at all, kindly raise your hand.
Sarika, this is Akash.
Hello.
I think you're, yeah, hi. Okay, this question is not from me, but from my son. He's really curious to know about the example you gave about dopamine, that interested teacher should bring in some treats and just in order to motivate the students. Now, this little mind, he's curious enough to know that why would the teacher make that extra effort?
Can you hear me now? Just to confirm.
Yeah, I can hear you now. And I would really like to know it myself as well, because at times we all involve in some kind of teaching. So I would really like to know what is there in the store for the teacher, that if he goes that extra mile, if he goes that, if he makes or she makes that extra effort, what's there in the store for her or him?
I totally understand that. And actually, like I mentioned throughout this webinar, for students, it's happiness and being able to cope with the pressure. But for teachers, it is increased interest. And I can tell you from my observations and also from doing some research that when students feel connected, when they feel happy and uplifted in your classroom, then they start to pay more attention. And this would mean that your teaching is more effective. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, okay.
Mr. Prashant, do you have a question? I will assume no and come back to you later if possible. Is there anyone else who would like to say a few, who would like to say a few words? All right, seeing none, we can move on, and I hope I will receive more participation in the next section. And this is our exit ticket. So like I've mentioned before, we always have exit tickets, a ticket from the future. And I will be sharing this in the chat. And basically in the light of the 4 chemicals I've been talking of, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins, I will be recognizing the first person who submits it. And I will just be trying to give them a burst of serotonin. I will put the link to the exit ticket in the chat.
So you want us to make those answers now?
Oh yes, please do that now. We do have some time left, 5 minutes.
Okay.
And just keep a note that I will be recognizing the first person who submits it. So let's be quick.
So can you just guide us that where can we find that form?
That form is in the chat box.
Okay, so we need to go in more and then chat, right?
Yes, I believe so. And if you're having any problems, then I can directly send that to you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I haven't received any responses yet, so I'll still be waiting.
Can you just give us a little bit of time? We are just trying to figure out this technological hiccup.
Oh, no problem. We have all
Thank
time,
you.
7:30, which is 4 minutes from now. All right, it seems like we have a winner of this small competition, and that is Mr. Vikas. So congratulations and thank you so much. I think we can have that round of applause reaction for Mr. Vikas. Come on, everyone.
All right. Well done, Vikas.
Okay.
Good job.
Yes.
Thank you.
So I will have a look through all of your responses, and I do sincerely hope that this webinar was able to help you as an educator, as a parent, and as a student. And this is my message that I would urge educators to go back and apply this in their own classrooms, and also students to start advocating for it. Please share this resource with your educators. I will put this on our YouTube channel. Take It From the Future has its YouTube channel, and that will be emailed to all of the people who registered. And please just promote this with your teacher, and let's just fight together for a student-friendly education system and help education advance. And now, before we leave, because it's nearly 7:30, I would like to take a group photo. So if you could, then please turn on your camera. All right, thank you, everyone.
Sadika, I just want to ask, hey Remus, I didn't see you there. Hi Miss Ollie. What book is the dose theory from?
All right, that might be a question, but I'll be a bit lenient there. It's from the book called Leaders Eat Last. I would definitely recommend you.
Okay.
All right, photos in 3, 2, 1. Thank you so much, everyone. And before we leave this webinar, just a big congratulations to all the teachers, because the Vietnamese Teachers Day is upcoming. It's on Saturday. So with that, you may all leave the meeting, and I will be ending the meeting now. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.